Hello, good morning students. Today I am going to teach you the lesson editing a text. In the connection of previous session, this topic is related to the same topic but in the form of story. How to edit a story, how to edit a short story. When you are taught a story, then you are asked to edit it. I am Dr. S.R.BHARGAVA, Department of English, Associate Professor. What is editing? As we have earlier defined the concept of editing, editing is the process of selecting and preparing written, photographical, visual, audible, and of cinematic material used by a person or an entity to convey message or information. Editing is a process of selection and preparation what written, photographic, visual, audible or cinematic material used by a person or entity to convey message or information. So editing conveys the procedure of selection, preparation or photographical, visual and audio material used by a person. The editing process can involve, and now the question arises, what involves in editing process? It involves correction, condensation, organization and many other modifications performed with an intention of producing a correct, consistent, accurate and complete piece of work. For example, you are given a piece of writing and then you are asked to make a proofreading. So editing is just like a proofreading in which we perform the duties of correction. Correction of sentence, correction of spelling, correction of sentence structure, etc. Condensation, brevity, organization, how to make a well-knit structure and many other modifications as required to produce a correct, consistent, accurate and complete piece of work. So editing involves editing and removing some material. The editing process often begins with the author's idea for the work itself. Its process begins with the idea for the work by author, continuing as a collaboration between the author and the editor as the work is created. So this question is very important, that collaboration of both writer or editor is important. Without their collaboration, editing is not possible. So it continues as a collaboration between the two. Editing involves other things like creative skills, human relations and a precise set of methods. Creative skills are very important in the process of editing, and human relations between editor and author, and the performer and the performed, and a precise set of methods. The methodology used in the editing process is very important, because how we select or prepare a photographic, visual, audio, cinematographic material. So human relations are very important. Copy editors correct spelling, grammar and align writings to house style. Style making is very important, because in the editing, copy editors use correct spelling, grammar and alienation of writing. Changes to the publishing industry since the 1980s have resulted in nearly all copy editing of the book manuscripts being outsourced to freelance copy editors. So there has been a change since 1980s, when the process of editing has been somewhat changed, because after the coming of internet or uh, telephonic services, the process of editing is somewhat changed. There are various editorial positions in the publishing. Typically, one finds editorial assistants reporting to the senior level editorial staff and the directors who report to senior executive editors. This goes on until the process of editing finishes. So, from lower level to upper level, between staff and directors, between junior to seniors, this process goes on continuously. Senior executives editors are responsible for developing a product for its final release. When it comes to final touch, it is the seniors who are responsible for developing a product. So they make it finalize. The smaller the publication, the more these roles overlap. The smaller the publication. When we think that the publication is very small, its role is overlapped. Now comes the question, how to edit a short story. If the students are asked for examination that how can they edit short story, after a lot of hard work and creative energy, you have completed a short story that you feel good about. It requires hard work, creative energy, because completing of a short story doesn't mean the editing of a story. You have to edit it because you have to work hard and you have to provide your creative energy. But you realize you still have not read it over and edited it to be just as tight as could be. So the realization is that you have not read it or edited it because it requires patience, it requires hard work and creative energy. You may struggle to edit a short story after you feel it is finished, especially if you are close to the material and have a hard time looking at it with a critical eye. The writer says that struggle is very important because without struggle, a short story can't be edited. Because if we have the materialist nearby us, we have a hard time because critically we have to observe the material before putting it into editing. To edit the story effectively, you can try revising the story on your own. If we think that our editing process is completed, we have to revise it because in our own words, the revision is must. To others, to the great valuable feedback on how to make it better because feedback from the reader's audience is very important. Come to the story with fresh eyes. If you want to edit a short story, you have to come the story with fresh eyes. To edit the story effectively, you need to try to read it with a fresh perspective. Fresh eyes means first fresh perspective. You may need to take a break and put the story away for a few days so you can think about other things or other stories. Because the taking break is very important because it requires patience and politeness in the mind. Then after a few days put it out again and read it yourself with fresh eyes. You may be surprised at how different it reads to you after you have not been staring at it for several hours straight. After a long period's interval, the freshness of eyes with creative energy is must. You may also try working on another piece of writing or doing a relaxing activity to get your mind off on the short stories. Because editing a short story requires peace of mind, relaxing activity. Once you feel you have almost forgotten about the short story entirely, pull it out again and read it. If you forget your task of reading or editing a story, you have to read it aloud. This will help you see it from a fresh perspective and edit it from a fresh point of view. So before editing a story, the freshness in the observation is needed. Read the story aloud. If you want to edit a story, reading it aloud is needed. You should read the short story aloud to hear how it sounds on the page. This can help you identify basic issues like misspelled words or grammatical errors, because the correction in spellings and sentence structure, grammatical structures can be identified. It can also allow you to listen to the story and make sure you are writing for the ear. So, listening skill is here important because it enables you that you are aware of the writing and listening by the others. A good story will sound as good when read out aloud as it does on the page. While reading a story aloud is very important because it takes its top place. You may read the story aloud several times to get a sense of how the voice and tone works in the piece. The combination of voice and tone in the reading of a story aloud is very important. You may use a pen to mark down sections or moments that don't sound clear or strong when read out loud. If the writer or the person wants to read a story aloud, he should mark that some sentences, some words are not pronounced loudly. So they should be underlined or marked because they don't have proper sound, because they are not so strong. Trim or remove any excess words. The writer advises to sort out the sentences, unnecessary words. Tighten up your language so it feels intentional and strong. You have to tighten your language because it has an intention with strength. Read each sentence in the short story and remove any words that seems unnecessary or excessive. Surplus words or extravagant words should be avoided. They should be sought out. You can remove adverbs or more than one adjective in a sentence to make it stronger. Use of adverbs or adjectives is not favorable to edit writing. This should be avoided. You may also by trimming down the words in each sentence so they are clear and easy to read. You have to trimming down. You have to sort down each sentence for the purpose of clarity and intelligibility to read. For example, you may have the following sentence in your story. He raced through the crowded, bustling street to catch the smelly, congested number I-1 bus. This sentence may be more effective if you cut out one or two adjectives. Adjectives should be avoided. You made it to read, he raced through the crowded street to catch the number 1 bus. You should also check for any sentences that are long-winded or run on sentences. Some sentences should be checked out. Often, if a sentence goes over 3 to 4 lines on a page, it is too long. Lengthy sentences should be avoided if they are in 3 or 4 lines. You may need to balance the narrative voice of the short story with your edits. The balance should be there because the narrative voice of the short story is compatible with edits. This means perhaps leaving in no longer sentence if this is the style and voice of the piece. Lengthy sentences should be avoided because they affect the style and the voice of the piece. If you do leave in longer sentences, make sure they feel intentional and purposeful. If we want to avoid or leave long sentences, our intention and purpose becomes very sure. So thanks students for a nice cooperation and listening my lecture very well. I think for the purpose of examination, you will get benefited definitely positively. Thanks once again and nice to meet you. Thank you.